Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the STEM Files. Assalamu alaikum. This is the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. Tonight's episode, we're going to be building with Dr. Safiyah Muhammad. We're going to be talking about synthetic materials used in business. So we're going to be talking about her experience with inorganic chemistry and so much more. Stay tuned for more after this, family.
Believe in these false prophets, I say I bet he lying. No football, New York City Giants. Girl dad, rest in peace to Kobe Bryant. When we teaching our babies, we teach them heavy science. Heavy science. When we teaching our women, we teach them heavy science. Heavy science.
Well, as our intro always says, we teach man, women, and children heavy science. And this is the platform to come for all your scientific inquiries, everything you want to know about any type of scientific endeavor and technological endeavor. We got it right here at the STEM Files. My name is Tariq Muhammad, aka Tariq Cardiac. I'm a biomedical research scientist with a concentration in cardiovascular pathobiology, which is the study of how diseases form in the heart and blood vessels. I'm joined by my right hand best friend, Jabril. What's going on, Fruit?
I'm well. All praises due to Allah. Peace, love, and blessings. Assalamu alaikum, family. I'm Jabril Muhammad, aka Jabrilliant engineer. I'm a civilian mechanical engineer with a focus on naval ship fluid systems and a background in material science and engineering, the study of the various material classes and how their properties can be used for several applications, making things stronger, faster, lighter, more effective, more efficient. Happy to be here always. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. And of course, family, as you all know, we added a third person to our hosting team, and unfortunately,
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
couldn't be with us physically, but she's here with us in spirit. Can you please, Jabril, tell us who Dr. Joy is and what she brings to the table?
I will humbly do so. Yes, sir. We are talking about Assistant Dr. Joy 2X, aka the Chi Mechanic Doctor of Chinese Medicine. She's been studying and practicing traditional Chinese medicine for about 12 years. In traditional Chinese medicine, we understand that the body innately knows and desires to heal itself. The medicine she offers is here to assist you in that journey like a mechanic for your vital energy. And we're going to bring some energy tonight with our guest for this evening. Let's get into it. So excited.
Absolutely. We have a very, very special guest on the platform. So let me tell you a little bit of history about tonight's guest, right? So for those of you who don't know, Original Man Scientific is the parent company of the STEM Files, right? The STEM Files is pretty much our media arm. Sister Dr. Safiyah was actually one of the original board members for the company when its first inception back in 2015, and she's considered an OG among us in terms of the building of the STEM Files brand and Original Man Scientific. She's been on the STEM Files when we was on Blog Talk Radio. So she's an OG in so many different ways on our platform. So we appreciate her coming back. Dr. Safiyah Muhammad, and I love saying that too because I remember when you undergrad, now it's doctor. So this is special for us in so many ways. So Dr. Safiyah Shabazz, welcome back to the platform. Assalamu alaikum.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you all. It's an honor. It's an honor to be back. You all have done some amazing work throughout the year. So it's been exciting to see the journey that this show has gone on, from humble beginnings all the way to the class that it has now. So it's an honor. Thank you all for inviting me, and I'm happy to be back.
Praise be to. I like that she said from the class that it has now. We came up like this.
That's right.
This is amazing.
That's right.
And I think a lot we were all able to come together and really represent Black people in science and technology and doing it in such a fun and an exciting way. But tonight's episode, it's not about us. Jabril and I always like to elevate the people we have on. And tonight we're going to be talking about synthetic materials used in business. But first and foremost, before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what inspired you going into chemistry? Because there's not a whole lot of there's not a lot of MGT chemists, professionally trained chemists in the Nation of Islam. So tell us more about that.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised Miami, Florida, so 7th region all the way. I did high school there. I did my undergraduate career there. And so when I started in undergrad, I was a marine biology major. I have a huge love for animals. So I envisioned myself being a marine veterinarian, right? So working on a marine life, serving as a veterinarian to them. And so I was in undergrad, I was taking my general education courses, and I had been hearing in the background that Marine biology is a lot of memorization. The courses were tough. So I took my intro course to marine biology, but then I kind of pushed the higher level courses off. Just continued to do my general classes. And so I was in my general chemistry class, my first real dive into chemistry. And I was just blown away. Like I got in trouble a couple of times in class because I was just talking to another sister there. She's now in her residency for medical school, but we got caught talking about how cool what we were learning was. And so I was blown away from that point.
Talking about that?
Yeah. Our teacher yelled at us because he thought we wasn't paying attention. He thought we were discussing things other than the material, right? And so he was a very interesting teacher. But despite that, my love for chemistry grew. And so what I call my journey into chemistry is really a sidestep, a little distraction. One day I'll get back into veterinary care, but right now I'm enjoying my course in chemistry. So I was in undergrad, I was going through all of my classes, and then I had a professor who kind of pulled me aside and asked if I had thought about research. So I began to do undergraduate research with him, and that was my first foray into inorganic chemistry. And then when it was about time for my junior year, at the end of my junior year, he had asked me what my career choice was. And I hadn't really thought about it. I was enjoying school, I was enjoying learning. And so he told me, have you ever thought about graduate school for chemistry? And he was telling me that when he was coming through, they had paid for 70% of the tuition. And so only a small portion would come from you, and then the rest would come from the school. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I'll go ahead and apply for some. So I went through and applied. They pay for your entire tuition, and they give you a stipend on top of that. So there's no need to have a job. There's no need for any extra work outside of just being a graduate student.
Right.
So that was a pretty easy choice to me. I thought that I could continue my education, learn a lot, still do research, and get paid to do all that. So I decided to do graduate school. So I applied to 8. 2 of them were in Florida. Those are my safe schools, right? Stay close to home. But I eventually ended up going to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So that was my first time moving away from home. Now, South Florida has hot and hotter as the 2 seasons, right? So not only was I moving away from home, moving away from my home mosque, and moving away from my family, but I was moving into a new area with all of the 4 seasons to experience. And so that was a pretty interesting and big change. Right. Now we were shielded a little bit from the lake effect that Chicago gets, but it was still pretty cold and still some winters that had feet of snow. So, but it was an exciting journey. I enjoyed my time in grad school. I got to connect with so many different people. I got to be involved. We talk about the fact that we don't have a lot of blacks in chemistry, right? In the chemical related fields. I got hands-on involvement with increasing K through 12 engagement, right? Thinking about how we engage young Black children and young women to increase their interest in the STEM field. So I got involved a lot in graduate school. And eventually I made my way to where I am now, which is a silicone polymer chemist in Dow Chemical Company, which is up in Midland, Michigan. So right in the middle of Michigan.
Got you. So this is
a long introduction.
No, that was perfect. I have so many questions, but I'm gonna start with this one, right? So you went from interest in marine biology, and then you went into once you started that chemistry course, that was it, right? So now you getting into chemistry is not far off from marine biology, but it's definitely something that's a little bit more, hard in terms of the sciences, right? So let me ask you this. When you started studying chemistry, what was it about it that was like, okay, marine biology ain't it, it's chemistry? Like what ticked off in your mind was like, okay, this is the area of science I'm gonna get into?
It was truly the mathematicalness of it. So I minored in math in undergrad as well, and just how mathematically we could approach, and it all made sense to me. So one of the first concepts that you learn in general chemistry is a concept called stoichiometry, and that's just mass balance of your reactions, right? And so from that, and then looking at how things change over time, but you can always pull a math formula. So it's the same in most fields. Physics, I know, has this as well, but as you begin to progress throughout the different classes and you go higher and higher, you introduce more math, right? And so you begin to introduce calculus to understand how things work. But at all points how things work. And as we continue to progress, the understanding got deeper and deeper and deeper. So they'll start teaching you first at a certain basic level, right? And you have a lot of assumptions that come in, but the more math you bring in, the more of those assumptions go out the way, and you can actually see how we derive, some of the principles that we learn and some of the theories that we have in chemistry. The same theories that come from physics, the same theories that govern biology and biological systems, we can explain them in chemistry. And so it was very interesting from that perspective.
Got you. Jabril, I know with your material science background, I know you got some stuff turning
Yes,
right now.
sir. It was funny because I was going to start off, and then just first and foremost, thank you again, sis, for accepting the invitation. As you were expressing and talking about your background, I was thinking about me and Tariq's and him, coming from the biological sciences and me having a background in not only a science but in engineering, but you working as a polymer chemist, right? So I have a background in not only like an understanding of the different material classes, so your metals, your super and semiconductors, right, your polymers, your ceramics, etc. So I want to take a step back and ask a couple of technical questions. So can we break down what is a polymer? Then can we break down more specifically what constitutes silicone and what is a resin? And then we can go from there.
Absolutely. So I will admit my background is not polymer chemistry, so I'm fairly new to the area. But essentially, what a polymer is a long chain of a monomer, and a monomer is a single unit, right? So say that we have a bead. The bead represents a single unit, right? And if you string a bunch of those beads on a chain, you'll get what's equivalent to a polymer, right? And so when we think about silicone polymers, silicone is an atom on the periodic table. It's a metal by itself, right? I actually have some, I don't know if you all can see, this is what pure silicone looks like. It's a shiny metallic material. And you can take that silicone and you can break it up by reacting it with, say, carbon. And so you can take the silicone and you can now install carbon groups onto it, which will separate the long chain of silicon atoms into individual silicon molecules. And then you can take those individual silicon molecules and you can string them together through a series of chemical reactions to make a silicon polymer. And so this is an example of what a silicon polymer looks like. This is a material called PDMS, polydimethyl siloxane. And so that is where we have taken silicon atom with two carbons on it to generate a long silicon monomers. Those silicon polymers. And then if we think about a resin, resins are highly oxidized forms of silicon polymers. So silicon makes 4 bonds, right? And for this fluid here, 2 of those bonds are oxygens. And so we connect those silicon monomers through the oxygen bonds. So if those oxygens are opposed from one another, we just get a long chain, right? However, if you increase the number of oxygens that are in your silicon, then you have different branch points that you can bind off of. So we can have either 3 or 4 oxygens on silica, and those are the things that usually constitute resins. So we no longer have a long chain that kind of glides past each other to make a liquid. We now have these big, highly branched structure, which are often solid-like materials. But what they do is they allow for reinforcement of, say, a PDMS polymer. We can now take those resins and add them in and make the material more heat resistant or more resistant to tear or scratching, right? Or more resistant to UV degradation. And so those are the areas that I work in and looking to develop new silicone resins.
Okay. So going from that liquid to a more solid state, on average, most resins are of a stickier or a solid nature that adds structure and strength.
Absolutely.
It's funny. One of the things my mind always goes to when I think about a resin is creation of friction. So I grew up playing the violin. And for those who are familiar with the violin, you have a resin that you will glide across your string to allow for increased gripping when you are playing your violin. So I remember long, times when growing up playing the violin before a show, before practice, I glided up and down the string to increase that grip and everything. So that's where my mind always goes to whenever I first learned about resin. Oh yeah, I used a little resin bar when I was playing violin growing up. So praise be to Allah. I guess for me, my final question with that is, how has your background and work in, polymer chemistry given you an increased appreciation for material science as a discipline? And I know like that's not your specific area of study, but where does material science lie as far as in connection with other, not only engineering disciplines, but in terms of industry in general? How important is it for societal advancement?
They are hand in hand. You do not have any products that come on the shelf without an understanding of the material science that goes into it. So from hair conditioner that you use to lipstick to the very phones and devices that we use, silicones are very important in that, and we constantly have to consider the material science and mechanical properties of the silicones and how they interact with other devices or other materials that they're going to be compatible with. So just as much as I'm becoming a polymer chemist, I'm also becoming a material scientist, because I have to have that understanding as well, especially when I'm thinking about designing new materials and their final application.
Got you. Now, my question is, we're talking about business, right? So, you made a very good point. These types of materials are everywhere. You can't get around it. Synthetic chemistry is almost like it's really the lifeblood of everything that we use, right? So, what just from a business perspective, right? Why do these companies, or why are some companies so fascinated by these materials? What started that original interest in silicone?
So that's a very interesting story. So the company, the parent company for this segment here is called Dow Corning, right? And so it is a blend of two chemicals. You have Dow, which specializes in plastics, right? And you have Corning from Corning Glass. And so what they wanted to do originally was they wanted to make a glass-like material that still had properties of a plastic, right? So still able to be firm, see-through even, but not shatter when you drop it on the ground, right? And so that sparked the development of silicone chemistry. And, to be very honest, what keep companies in a business is whether or not it is lucrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so because of the properties of silicones and how they differentiate themselves from other plastic materials, not only is it a market for them, but you can also charge a premium because they offer a better service, right? And so that's probably the main reason why folks are in silicones. You'll usually find that in industry, you chase profit, whereas in academia, you chase interest, right? And so if silicones weren't lucrative, you'd see more silicone chemistry being done in academics, because the chemistry is extremely cool. It's just, it has that business aspect to it as well.
Absolutely. We're talking about business, and we're talking about people who have, we're talking about different types of materials that have really, made billionaires. They've made millionaires all over the planet, right? And one of those billionaires that was made from taking advantage of these types of materials is Henry Ford.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Ford really, and I'm not trying to, elevate, Henry Ford or anything like that, but
Truth is truth.
Right.
Right.
His business aptitude towards using chemicals to further his agenda and further his company, it was very, very, powerful and popular at the time
Mm-hmm.
he was living and now. And one of the scientists that he worked with was Dr. George Washington Carver, right?
Mm-hmm.
He worked with Dr. Carver to develop polymers that would reinforce the steel that he was using on his cars, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get from you, we have a picture of Dr. Carver and we have a picture of Dr. Percy Julian on the right. Both of these scientists have extensive history with the soybean.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Dr. Carver, him in the sweet potato and in the peanut, and of course, Dr. Julian with the calabar bean and different things like that, and creating the
Mm-hmm.
first class of steroids that we use in medical applications. Can you talk about these two men's influence on your field, and how
Mm-hmm.
they've been able to inspire you personally to do what you do?
So when I was in University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I found out that the very first Black Ph.D. awarded in the United States was to St. Elmo Brady, and he was from he received his Ph.D. from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And so during my time there, the American Chemical Society dedicated that as a national historic landmark. And then when I came to Dow, I also learned about some of the early pioneers in the area. And if you take a look at their history, you see that they have a lot of overlap and inspiration from these two men here. And so, as brilliant as they were, obviously living in racist white America, right? They couldn't become employed in areas that they love to be, right? In schools that they love to be. So they were often relegated to HBCUs, right? And I know that George Washington Carver, as well as Percy Julian, have a long, rich history in HBCUs. And so we find the same with St. Elmo Brady, and we find the same with some of the other powerful Black minds that have come before me. And so those folk really lay the foundation, right? We sit on their shoulders. There are a lot of legislations that is passed in the United States, but it's nothing like having those folks who came before us lay the foundation and go through the ridicule, right? Go through the demeaning experiences, right? Go through the lack of pay, go through the mistrust and the abuse of their work, right? They went through all of that so that we can be here today benefiting from the fruits of their labor. So I owe a great deal to all of those Black scientists and chemists that came before us who laid the foundation so that we could be here today. And that's why I'm so passionate about giving back and inspiring the next generation, right? Because there is nothing that we put our mind to of good that we can accomplish, right? And there's so much untapped potential that lies in our young folks. And I remember that Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Farrakhan constantly talk about how the answer to prayers come through the womb of women, right? And so I'm sure that as they were going through their journey, right, and as they were struggling through trying to make a way in this world, right, with the brilliance that Allah instilled in them, they prayed that the journey would get easier for those who would come behind them, right? And so because of those prayers, we are today. And because of those prayers, we have young minds that we have to go back and touch and lift up. And so I reflect on their presence and what they gave to us and what they're still giving to us through their legacy. And I strive and I ask Allah to give me just a smidgen of their strength and spirit to be able to inspire future generation. But their presence is necessary and it must be taught, continue to be taught.